Today, I wanted to talk about why I think art is discouraged. I've been thinking of a list, and I know it sounds kind of weird. I mean, I'm not a professional artist, but if you are growing up in a society, you'll notice that a lot of art is the act of making. I should have said why I think the act of making why I think the act of making art is discouraged. I think the main part of it, and it's going to sound weird, maybe even conspiratorial, in which it's hard for society to pin a dollar amount on it or like a currency value. And I think the reason for that is because if you think to school, so a big important thing about school that I remember is being one, it's important to always be on time. Two, following rules. Three, understanding the bell and what that means and when to go to your next class. But yeah, instruction following. And I find a lot of those important. I mean, I've talked about having a schedule, setting your efficient time aside. But I think for the larger run of this, I think a lot of these aspects are kind of remnants from wartime. I know that sounds weird, but perhaps there is another reason, and I want to say being prepared to work in a factory. I think a lot of our society is structured around being prepared to work in a factory, but a lot of factory and manufacturing jobs are far and few in between, at least where I'm at. And, thinking about that, I think that if you were to ever be drawing in school, well, you would probably get in trouble. They would say your pencil is not for drawing. I will say that some schools may have like art class more often just in like grade school or elementary. But after that, I feel like it's very far and few in between. I feel like you don't really see any of that. I could be wrong. That could depend on the area. But in my experience, that was one of those things that was cast to the side. And I think for the big aspect of it was STEM. If you don't know what STEM is, science, technology, engineering, math. And the funny thing about that is that you could, like when I was in school, you could cross out the T because they never, like, I think when I was in school, it was like right at that transition point in which they did not care about technology. I think it was a combination of computers being expensive and also that probably teachers who taught technology to any capacity, probably it was either considered something that was too complex or they couldn't afford the tools to do it, to have a computer for everyone. And that's kind of the thing you have to have. Like, I'll say, even in this day and age, you have to spend a good deal of money if you want to have a good computer, one that's not gonna like crap out on you, is what I would say. So for the most part, when I was in school, I didn't learn engineering, but science and math, those were the two big things. I mean, I don't know, engineering, I learned physics and chemistry, but I didn't learn like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, etc. I know like everything's math in the core, but I don't know, probably people who are engineers, you get what I mean. But the point I'm trying to say here is that I think a lot of it, if you think about school, a lot of school is like standardized in one way or another. Doesn't mean everyone's going to have the same education when it comes to this, but for the most part, for a society to be successful for the factory, they need a lot of people going into science, technology, engineering, or math. If you look at the stock market, if you're interested in that, or if you just like look at our country as a whole, I would say the world, because we live in like a global economy now. If there's anything that was evident from 2020, what I've learned is everything is on the basis of unlimited growth. Whether or not it could happen, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But when it comes to being efficient, making stuff, always being innovative, I have no doubt someone will find a way to do that. I mean, people are always making new stuff, whether they're inventions, etc. But I think for the most part, for society to make a lot of money as a whole, it requires on a lot of people working for someone else to work for those goals. And you need a lot of scientists, you need a lot of engineers, technologists, and mathematicians. Math, very debatable. I don't mean this in an insulting way. I mean, there's probably an edge case, but more in the sense of applied through like engineering in one form or another. And I think behind that is those are the jobs that really spur growth and increase GDP for a country. And I think for the most part, and I think this makes sense, but I mean, schools are not going to teach art. Like, you could really stretch it to make a valid reason for it. But for the most part, like, if I were to say anyone who I ever worked for, I would never even bring up art in a conversation. I mean, heck, like if you think of like a job interview or anything like that, I mean, it just makes sense you would never bring that up, even in personal time like that, because the whole idea is that for your company to be successful, they need you to always be working and always be working for them and always be working towards their goal of making money in some way to increase GDP, however that may be. So because of that, I mean, I don't know, like I said, you could stretch it and say, oh, if you do art, maybe that gives you relaxing time so you could be more successful at STEM. But I'm going to be honest with you, for the most part, that's not how your employer is thinking. I mean, probably not is what I'm going to say. It's a stretch. So yeah, the larger thing here is what I would say is that society needs to grow. Sorry, I'm looking through my camera as I draw that. But it's all about the GDP. It's all about making society as a whole more money. I know this sounds weird. Not making you more money, making them more money. And I hate to say it, and I could be wrong, because I know it always depends and there are always edge cases. But the thing is, when I was in school, that was kind of the beginning of the time of, I want to say, the hour of code. I actually did participate in that when I was in high school. And I think that what that did was it spurred a lot of people to be interested in computer science and related fields. I know there are many, not everyone will call it computer science. I mean, different from like a computer engineer, but for the most part, I think what ended up happening was that our society realized that probably around the early 2010s, like 20 to, I want to say, it's a stretch, I want to say 2010 to 2015, and this is just my anecdotal evidence. But I think what ended up happening was that for a while, many companies, they didn't understand technology at all. It was kind of just a black box to them. And there are probably people like this nowadays. And I want to say that from this period of time, the slow introduction of computer science or like coding classes into high school and maybe even earlier, like what do they call it? Some people call it middle school. Other people, there's another name for it, junior high. Some people call it middle school or junior high. And I think that when I was in school, they never taught it, but I think probably nowadays they are. Not everywhere, but probably a lot more places. I want to say it's probably a lot more common. And I think the big reason for that was because these jobs were incredibly Not always, but more often than not, I think because people didn't understand them and because there were not as many people in the job field, a lot of people ended up going into the job field. And I think because of that, it drove down wages a lot. I could be wrong here, but it's my personal opinion of what I've seen. A lot of this could be related to bubbles as well. If you think of like 2008 and maybe the early 2020s as well. But I think for the most part there was an encouragement by our society, whoever funds the schools, whatever that be, to encourage these jobs because they helped increase GDP. And I think by making more people interested in these fields, it helps companies make more money. But it sounds weird to say, I'm going to sound like just weird. More individuals getting into jobs working for other companies, when you have a larger labor pool, your incomes are driven lower because there's more competition. I know it sounds weird, it's even conspiratorial, but just like from everything I've put together, that kind of seems how a lot of it goes, in which the things you were taught in school ultimately prepare you for what you're going to do with the rest of your life when it comes to a career and making money. But many of the people who are doing this, it's a bit difficult to do it independently. You can do it independently, and I've worked with contractors before, and I've done some contracting gigs, and what I found is that competition is really high. People look for more larger contracting companies rather than individual. An individual is a bit risky, so I understand it. But for the most part, I think a lot of this has to do with what I'll call a factory society, in which that everything we do in our society is trying to be fit into this factory model. And the idea behind that is to make everything really reproducible and replaceable cogs is what I'll say it. In which, back then they had assembly lines. People worked on an assembly line. They did the same thing for like, I don't know, 10, 12 hours a day, and they got paid really little. And I think the point of that is that every employer would want a factory employee in which that they could easily be swapped if that employee leaves. And it makes sense. I understand why. So the other thing, you're wondering like how this connects to art. Well, the whole point I'm trying to say here is that it intentionally does not. And I know that sounds weird. Many people joke about an art career, and I wouldn't recommend it myself. I mean, I'm not a successful artist, but the point I'm trying to say here is that when it comes to art, I feel like it's really unlike the factory society. I think art takes an incredible amount of time to practice all the time to get good. I mean, look how bad my handwriting is, and I want to get that better. And I think the thing about that is that a lot of these things require a lot of practice, but I feel like when it comes to STEM, it does require a lot of practice as well. But I feel like with this, having easy replaceable cogs has been kind of taught and prioritized over art. So I think our society as a larger whole greatly discourages it because it doesn't have a greater effect on the GDP. And it's just my theory. I could be wrong here, but like I said, it takes a really long time to get good at art. A lot of time for being able to even just draw a simple line. I know that sounds bad example, but the point here is that art, and I'm looking through my camera when I do this, but art takes so much time, no matter what you're even trying to do. And even to get to that point in which, if that's what you want to do, if you want to make it a career, I think that it could be hard making reproducible things to sell. It's kind of like obscure. It doesn't have a strong effect on GDP. Like, say you become a scientist, say you become a chemist. Well, I'm pretty sure you could find you put your resume together, you have so-so experience in university or doing internships and whatnot, and you could work for a chemical, I don't know, become a chemical engineer or something like that. Granted, that takes a long time to do, no doubt, but I feel like the path is more well-defined and probably a lot of people need chemical engineers. It's probably a sought after thing as well. Like, I mean, if you have a lot of bridges in disrepair in your area, this kind of goes back into society as a whole, in which if you think about engineers, they serve in a really important purpose. I'm trying to think what the name for it would be. I don't know, maybe civil engineer, people who build bridges, road infrastructure, and stuff like that. And I think when it comes to that, that's like a really important thing for society. And I guess you could say a lot of these are supposed to pay more if they have a greater contribute on society and thus GDP. But like some of these are crucial. Like you have to think of like water treatment, roads, bridges, connecting point A to point B is really important for shipping stuff. I mean, all of that, I mean, think about Amazon, the company, technology. They are delivering stuff all around the clock, and they're really profitable with that, and they're like really they have everything calculated to a T, I believe, when it comes to that. So things like that, it's really encouraged. But just because it's encouraged doesn't mean it'll always make the individual a lot of money. I do want to say that it'll probably make them more than if you were to say get into an art career. But I think a lot of this is because pretty much every job, I could be wrong here, I think people can go independent, but most jobs, from what I've seen, always rely on one working for someone else. Like I feel, I can't say I ever, I mean, I did know some people who, I mean, they were owners of a factory. They didn't work for it. I guess you could say it's a lot better to be an owner than having to work for it. I mean, to work for a company, but I know that's weird. But what I'm trying to say here is that, I said here, only artists who, you put in a lot of time and are good or encouraged. I feel like maybe this could be debatable, but, this goes back into it takes a really long time to get good at it. Like, and it takes if it takes a long time to help GDP, people aren't going to like that. If it's not going to help society directly in a way, it's going to be difficult to justify that and get people to pay you for that. So I understand why. I'm not saying the whole purpose of art is to make money. I did not mean it in that way. But you also have to think of it also in this way, in which the things in our society that are greatly encouraged for one to do are things to make money. And a lot of that has to do with survival, in which you have to do something to survive. I guess you could say, and one of the other issues is political art, which could be a very dangerous thing. If someone makes political art, they divide half of their audience, and it's things like that that, believe it or not, they really can affect society, whether it be, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it is important, I think, and I think that it could be a double-edged sword for however it may be used. And I think just for one of the sheer acts of it being unsafe, unnatural, not, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it could be a threat to society in some way. I think that's another reason why it can be discouraged. And I mentioned here about replaceable cogs. So the thing is, if you make art and you are building GDP, if you're a famous artist, I want to say that just because you're contributing to the GDP doesn't mean you're a replaceable thing. If you look at some of the great artists, or what the art world may consider a great artist, they are not going to be replaceable. And not to go on the tangent of whoever would be a famous artist would be making money, you have to think that if they die, I know that sounds weird, but whoever owns the rights to their art then is going to make a good deal of money. But the point I'm trying to say is that it's not good if your art being worth a lot of money depends on you being dead. and so effectively, the only way your stuff can really contribute is if you're, it's a right word, post-mortem, to help with GDP. And the other thing here is, just because you're a famous artist doesn't mean you could pass that on. So the problem here is that if you're a famous artist and you die, only the stuff you have in existence and your name, and if they sell your brand in one form or another, can contribute to GDP, whether your kids own that or whoever owns that. The problem with that is, like, a scientist, let's say you're a big wig engineer for a company, okay, and let's say the retirement is in the 70s, right? Okay, you are 72, and you have a heart attack and you die. Okay, so the thing about that is the factory society helps manage everything in a way to make it so, okay, well, this is good. We have another person lined up with a similar level of experience to step into that position, to be a replaceable cog. So the benefit to that is that the company owner, the factory owner, could have people swapped out, and those people could help continue contribute to GDP. So that is a big benefit. If you created a company in a STEM field, and and the company outlives you, even if the company owner dies, you're not going to run into this art situation. Like, you have a successful company, and you could get people to be, you could get cogs. I don't want to call them people anymore, but you could get cogs and put them in this factory system and get them to work. And it doesn't matter if they die, because you could have other replaceable ones lined up. So effectively, in the large scheme of things, I want to say a lot of it has to do with money. I know this sounds completely weird, but I honestly think that to a large extent, there's kind of that's kind of it. That's kind of how it's set up, in which a lot of our society revolves around the dollar. And I know that sounds kind of conspiratorial, but in my opinion, I think a lot of that is how it's managed. And the only reason why I say that is, me personally, I am in the tech field, and I think I got into it in the wrong time. I should have been born 20, 30 years earlier. I know that sounds weird and that's out of my control, but yeah, I think a lot of this kind of affects society. Like, I feel like with most people, if they ask you, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Or what do you want to do? And you say, well, I want to make art. And I think if you say that more often than not, you get laughed at, ridiculed. And I think a lot of that has to do with, it became an encouraged societal thing. But if you say, oh, well, I want to be a mechanical engineer, and I hate to say it, or like an engineer, there are definitely people who are interested in that, for fun, or just have a general peak. But I feel like for a large amount of this is if well, I don't want to say it that way. What I want to say is that I think if you say something, you want to be in the STEM field in some way, you get a lot more encouraged. And I guess a lot of that does make sense because of survival being the number one priority, in which, I'll be honest with you, I would not be able to survive as an artist. Dealing with many different types of web technologies, that's what, as much as it could drive me nuts sometimes, that is what gets me to survive and pay my bills. But yeah, I guess you could say a lot of that, I don't know. Maybe do it for fun is what I would say. Don't try to go into it professionally. But yeah, it being discouraged, I think a lot of it has seeped into society for many reasons. And I want to say, even if you look at the old people who really structured our society, you have to think of, okay, well, who donated, who helped build the schools, infrastructure, everything. Obviously, a lot of that is going to come from the government, and a lot of it does make sense for why they do it. But I wanted to just touch upon the fact of why I think a lot of this stuff, how it fits into society as a larger whole. And I think that maybe even when people are discouraging you, they may not even be understanding themselves why they're discouraging you. I think it's become kind of abstracted, and I think that was kind of the point I guess you could say in the end, it's good to be a factory owner and bad to be a factory worker, whether that be a factory or an employee of some type. But yeah, I think that is my theory for why I think the act of making art is discouraged. But yeah, that's all I wanted to share. Let me know what you think. It's something that has been in the back of my head for a long time. I'm not sure if I ever said this before, but I want to say I did draw for fun a little in 2013, but I did stop. I don't know why I stopped. I think I was so bad that I felt like I should never pick up a pencil again, and I didn't start again until 2019. But the point I'm trying to say, well, you get the point. That's all. Just a couple of weird thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments, because I'm more interested in what everyone else thinks of this. I mean, you know, me not being an artist, and I just do it for fun, but you know, in my personal life, I do have a lot of experience. Just, I don't deal with like every tech in the world. I mean, there's just too much tech. I mean, I've done more programming. That's been my big thing. More web languages. I mean, I have used other code, but like I never worked with like embedded systems or stuff like that. I just didn't have the need. But yeah, that's all. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening. Bye.